and I talked to George prior to this podcast. It's probably basically the only real research I did for this entire podcast. And George still has PTSD from the clotheslines that he got from Ultimate Warrior. And he just talked about how the Warrior had the hardest clothesline of all time.
Wow, of all time.
Of all time. And George had to wrestle him 8 times. And the first time he did it, it was one of those tapings where they did multiple shows. And so Warrior was going to wrestle multiple times. So there was this guy, Bob Emery. I believe he was like a guy that was trained at Nelson Royals. He was a big, jacked up dude. He was a very sizable man. And he got put in there with Warrior, and Warrior dislocated his shoulder.
Jesus.
And George was like, oh, crap. I got to wrestle Warrior in the next tape. What's he going to do to me if he dislocated the shoulder of this Herculean man? What do you think he's going to do with average old George South? And so when the Warrior threw the clothesline, George put his hands up to protect his face, because the Warrior, as George would say, he just wouldn't like hit you in the chest. He would just ball his fist up as hard as he could, which makes his basically like forearm and entire bicep and everything like a baseball bat, and he would just swing it in the direction of your head. So George is just getting his hands up to protect his face, because he's not trying to hit you in the safe areas of your chest or any meaty part of your body. No, he's swinging for your face. So George puts his hands up, and Warriors obviously clotheslines him in the forearms. When they get to the back, the Warrior starts screaming at George and saying George's forearms hurt the Ultimate Warrior's arm.
Jesus.
And George is just like, how can I hurt you? You got $1 million body. You mean to tell me my forearms hurt you? And he yelled and he walked off and he belittled George in front of everybody. And then of course George had to wrestle him multiple times. And what George would say is like the Warrior would listen a little bit. Like he was a dick, but he would listen a little bit. So George's bright idea was, as far as like taking that clothesline, is like, well, if I can figure out a way to blow him up before I take that clothesline. So George would be like, hey, buddy, maybe before you give me the clothesline, how about I duck one? And his thought process was that the Warrior would swing so hard for the one that George ducked out of the way of, he wouldn't have enough energy to completely murder him when he finally did hit him. That's some job guy psychology. That's like next level right there.